Mm. Mm-mm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So whoever's joining, this is just for me, but if you want to listen, you can listen. But this just helps me. So you'll be hearing a lot of different things in the background. Uh, so okay. The scope of consciousness. Can unconscious thoughts affect your behavior? Keeping an eye out. Humans are not the only creatures capable of processing information while apparently unconscious. While ducks sleep, one hemisphere of their brains can process visual information from an eye that remains open. Birds positioned where they are most vulnerable to predators, such as at the end of a row, may spend twice as much time in this alert sleep than do birds in more protected positions. Rattenberg, Lima, and M. Lehner, 1999. Mental activity changes constantly. The features of consciousness at any instant, what reaches your awareness, the decisions you make, and so on, make up what is called your consciousness state. At that moment, Tassi and Musette, 2001. Possible states of consciousness include coma, deep sleep, hypnosis, meditation, daydreaming, and alert wakefulness. Consciousness can also be altered by drugs and other influences. Hmm. Okay. Let me scoot that over. Ooh. Ooh, I got to bring. Ooh. That's too big. Okay. All right. So that's deep. Okay. Um, that's weird. Okay. Consciousness states can be viewed as different points along a scale of continuum of consciousness. Kavana et al. 2011. For example, suppose you're aboard an airliner flying from New York to Los Angeles. As the pilot calmly scans instrument displays while talking to an air traffic controller. A lawyer in the seat next to you finishes her second cocktail while planning a courtroom strategy. Across the aisle, a young father gazes out the window. daydreaming while his small daughter sleeps in his lap, dreaming of dreams of her own. All these people are experiencing different states of consciousness. Some states are active and some are passive. The daydreaming father lets his mind wander, passively noticing images, memories, and other mental events that come to mind. Like the pilot, the lawyer actively directs her mental processes. In her case, though, as she elevates various options and considers their likely outcomes, she is altering her state of consciousness by sipping alcohol. Mm. Generally, people spend most of their time in a waking state of consciousness. Mental processing in this state varies with changes in attention or arousal. Taylor, 2002. While reading, for example, you may temporarily ignore sounds around you. Similarly, if you're upset or bored or talking on a mobile phone, you may tune out important cues from the environment, making it dangerous to perform complex activities such as driving a car. Mm. Levels of consciousness. Okay. Consciousness is the awareness of external stimuli and our own mental activity. Consciousness state, the characteristic of consciousness at any particular moment. Mm. The events and mental process that you are aware of at any given moment are said to exist in the conscious level. Mm. For example, look at the Necker cube in figure 4. If you're like most people, you can hold the cube in one orientation for only a few seconds before the other version pops out at you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The version that you experience at any moment is at your conscious level of awareness for that moment. Mm-hmm. Some events, however, cannot be experienced consciously. For example, you are not directly aware of your brain regulating your blood pressure or controlling the dilation of your pupils in your eyes. Mental processes that control our biological functions occur at the non-conscious level. Totally removed from conscious awareness, people can learn to alter a non-conscious process through biofeedback training, in which they receive information about their biological process in order to control them. Usually special equipment is required, but you can approximate a biofeedback session by having a friend take your pulse at 1 minute intervals while you sit quietly. Okay. First, establish a baseline pulse. Then imagine a peaceful scene or think about lowering your pulse rate. Then ask your friend to softly say whether your pulse is higher or lower compared with the baseline. After 4 or 5 minutes of having this information fed back to you, you will probably be able to keep your pulse rate below the original baseline. Yet the pulse regulating processes themselves remain outside your consciousness. Mm. Have you ever annoyed someone by continuously humming or whistling the same tune without realizing you were doing so? If you have, you already know that mental processing that is not conscious can become conscious or can influence conscious experience. Farrugia et al. 2015, Kaunitz, Rowe, and Suiya, 2016. These mental events make up the cognitive and unconscious, Weber, 1992, which includes the pre-conscious and the subconscious. Mental events that are outside awareness, but that can easily be brought into awareness, are said to exist at the pre-conscious level. What did you have for dinner last night? Mm. Mm. The information you needed to answer this question probably wasn't already in your conscious awareness, but it was at the pre-conscious level. So when you read the question, you could answer it immediately. Similarly, when you play trivia games, you draw on the large storehouse of pre-conscious memories to come up with obscure facts. Mm. Other mental activities can alter thoughts, feeling, and actions, but are more difficult to bring into awareness. Mm. Okay. Sigmund Freud suggested that these unconscious activities, especially those involving unacceptable sexual and aggressive urges, are actively kept out of consciousness. Most psychologists do not accept Freud's view, but they still use the term unconscious or subconscious to describe mental activity that influences us in various ways, but that occurs outside of awareness. Dijksterhuis and Strick, 2016. Conscious level, the level of consciousness at which mental activities accessible to awareness occur. Non-conscious level, the level of consciousness at which reside processes that are totally inaccessible to conscious awareness. Pre-conscious level, the level of consciousness at which several several mental events that are not currently conscious but can become conscious at will. Unconscious, the term used to describe a level of mental activity said by Freud to contain an unacceptable sexual, aggressive, and other impulses of which an individual is unaware. Subconscious, another term that describes the mental level at which influential but normally inaccessible mental processes take place. Mental processing without awareness. Our ability to mentally process information without being aware of it was demonstrated in an experiment with patients who had surgery under general anesthesia. After their operations, but while the patients were still unconscious from the anesthesia, a recording of 15 word pairs was played over and over for them in the recovery room. After regaining consciousness, the patients could not say what words were on the recording or even whether a recording had been played at all. However, when given one word from each of the word pairs and asked to say the first word that came to mind, the patients came up with the other member of the word pair from the recording. Cork, Killstorm, and Hammeroff, 1992. Even when the conscious and alert, you can process and use information without being aware of doing so. Fufu and Dien's 2008, Mudrick et al. 2011. In one study, participants watched a computer screen as an X flashed in on the floor locations. The task was to indicate as quickly as possible where the X appeared. Though the location of the X seemed to vary randomly, it actually followed a set of complex rules. If the X moves horizontally twice in a session, its next move will be vertical. Participants' responses became progressively faster and more accurate. Then, unknown to the participants, the rules were abandoned and the X appeared in truly random locations. Instantly, the participants' accuracy and speed deteriorated. Apparently, the participants had learned the rules without knowing what they were, and this learning improved their performance. However, even when offered $100 to state the rules that had guided the location sequence, they could not do so, nor were they sure that any such rules existed. Lewicki, 1992. Hmm. Visual processing without awareness may even occur in some blind people. When blindness is caused by damage only to the brain's primary visual cortex, pathways from the eyes are still connected to other brain areas that process visual information. Garridio, 2012. Such connections may permit visual processing without awareness. a condition called blind sight. Sturrock and Cowie, 1997. People who experience blind sight say they see nothing, but if forced to guess, they may still locate visual targets, identify the direction of the moving images, reach for objects, name the color of lights, and even discriminate happy from fearful faces. Azoparty and Hawk, 2011, Cowie, 2010. The same blind sight phenomenon has been created in visual normal volunteers using magnetic brain stimulation to temporarily disable the primary visual cortex. Allen, Sumner, and Chambers, 2014. Research on priming also demonstrates mental processing without awareness. In a typical priming study, people respond faster or more accurately to stimuli they have seen before, even if they do not consciously recall those stimuli. Squire and Deed, 2015. In one study, for example, people looked at figures like those in figure 4.2. They had to decide which figures could exist in three-dimensional space and which could not. Participants were better at classifying pictures they had seen before, even when they couldn't remember seeing them. Schachter et al., 1991. Some priming effects are short-lived, but others can last for years. Mitchell, 2006. This person wrote a book off of just commenting about other people's stuff. To some degree, the decisions and choices we make every day may be guided by mental processes without our awareness. Intuition may be one example. I'm not pronouncing these names again. Your lucky choice of the fastest moving supermarket checkout line might seem to have been based on nothing more than a hunch or gut feeling, but previous visits to that store might have given you useful information that you didn't know you had about the efficiency of various clerks. In a laboratory study that supports this notion, people watch recorded television commercials while the changing stock prices of fictional companies crawled across the bottom of the screen. Later, these people were asked to choose which of these companies they liked best. They couldn't recall anything they had seen about the company's stock, so they had to make their choice on the basis of their gut reaction to the company names. Nevertheless, their choices were not random. They were often chose companies whose stock prices had been rising rather than those whose stock had been falling. Hmm. I'm trying to read this and then take this quiz. It says scamming for answers. Or would I be scrolling for answers? So I'm trying to read it. Okay. Mm. Can subliminal messages change your behavior? The research described so far shows that we don't always have to be aware of information in order for it to affect us. How strong can this influence be? In 1957, a market researcher named James Vickery claimed that a New Jersey movie theater flashed messages such as buy popcorn and drink Coke on the screen, too briefly to be noticed. While customers watched the film Picnic, he said that their messages caused a 15% rise in sales of Coca-Cola and a 58% increase in popcorn sales. Can messages that are perceived at a subliminal level, that is, below conscious awareness, act as a form of mind control? Many people seem to think so. I don't. That's a bunch of bullcrap. You choose to do whatever it is you choose to do. It ain't because of what somebody put on a screen. You chose to go buy some popcorn. Each year, they spend millions on videos and audio products whose subliminal messages are supposed to help them lose weight, raise self-esteem, quit smoking, make more money, or achieve other goals. What am I being asked to believe or accept? And at the end of the day, whatever I'm being asked to believe or accept, it's my choice to believe or accept. Two types of claims have been made about subliminal stimuli. The more general one is that subliminal stimuli influence people's behavior. A second, more specific claim is that subliminal stimuli can effectively change people's buying habits, political opinions, self-confidence, and other complex attitudes and behaviors without their awareness or consent. Mind control. But in order for them to control it, you got to believe it. What evidence is available to support the assertion? Evidence that subliminal messages can affect conscious judgments comes in part from laboratory studies that present visual stimuli too briefly to be perceived consciously. In one such study, participants saw slides showing people performing ordinary tasks such as washing dishes. Unknown to the participants, each slide was preceded by a subliminal exposure to a photo of positive stimuli, such as a child playing, or a negative stimuli, such as a monster. Later, participants rated the people in the visual slides that had been preceded by a positive stimuli photo as being more likable, polite, friendly, successful, and reputable. The subliminal photos not only affected participants likely of the people they saw, but also shaped beliefs about their personalities. In another study, participants were exposed to subliminal presentations of slides showing snakes, spiders, flowers, and mushrooms. Even though the slides were impossible to perceive at a conscious level, participants who were afraid of snakes or spiders showed physiological arousal and reported feeling fear. If they don't like seeing something, what do you think? In response to slides of snakes and spiders, the results of studies such as these support the notion that subliminal information can have an impact on judgments and emotions, but they say little or nothing about the value of the subliminal recordings for achieving self-help goals. In fact, no laboratory evidence exists to support the effectiveness of these recordings. Their promoters offer only the reports of satisfied customers. Are there alternative ways of interpreting the evidence? Many claims for subliminal advertising, including the New Jersey movie theater case, have been unmasked as publicity stunts using phony data, and testimonials from satisfied customers could be biased by what these people would like to believe about the subliminal recording they bought. In one study designed to test the possibility, half the participants were told that they would hear recordings containing subliminal messages for improving memory. The rest were told that the subliminal messages would promote self-esteem. However, half of the participants in the memory group actually got self-esteem messages, and half of the self-esteem group actually got memory messages. Regardless of which version they received, participants who thought they had heard memory enhancement messages reported improved memory. Those who thought that they had received self-esteem messages said their self-esteem had improved. In other words, the effects of the recordings were determined by the listener's expectations, not by the subliminal content of the recording. These results suggest that customers' reports about the value of subliminal self-help recordings may affect placebo effects based on optimistic expectations rather than the effects of subliminal messages. Okay. What conclusions are most reasonable? The available evidence suggests that subliminal perception occurs, but that it has no potential for mind control. Subliminal effects are usually small and short-lived, and they mainly affect simple judgments and general measures of overall arousal. The effects also tend to be related to temporary conditions such as fatigue or motivation. For example, a subliminal message about a beverage is more likely to influence a person who is thirsty than one who is not. As for subliminal messages aimed at long-term behavior change, most researchers agree that such messages have no special power to create needs, goals, skills, or actions. In fact, advertisements, political speeches, and other messages that we can perceive consciously have far stronger persuasive effects. Subliminal messages in popular music. Would the persuasive power of subliminal messages be increased if they were presented at normal speed, but in reverse, so that we could not understand them consciously? According to numerous websites, this is how secret messages have been hidden in the recorded music of Lady Gaga, Marilyn Manson, Eminem, Nine Inch Nails, Pink Floyd, the Rolling Stones, the Eagles, and hundreds of other performers. Some contend that these backmasked subliminal messages have caused listeners to commit suicide or murder. However, for this claim to be true, subliminal backward messages would have to be perceived at some level of consciousness. That's why I said no. You decided to do that. What was the researcher's question? There's no clear evidence that secret backward messages exist in most of the music cited. However, John R. Vaki and J. Don Reed, 1985, wondered whether if any backward messages had existed, could they be perceived and understood while the music was playing forward? They also asked whether such a message would affect the listener's behavior. How did the researchers answer the question? First, Vaki and Rand made tape recordings of a person reading portions of the Bible's 23rd Psalm and Lewis Carroll's poem, Jabberwocky. This poem includes many nonsense words, but it follows the rules of grammar, twas, brilling, and the slithy toes, tubs. The recordings were then played backwards to college students who judged whether they had heard would have been meaningful or non-sequential if played forward. What did the researchers find? When the students heard the recordings being played backwards, they could not discriminate sense from nonsense. They could not tell the difference between declarative sentences and questions. They couldn't even identify the original material on which the recordings were based. In short, the participants couldn't understand the backward messages at a conscious level. Could they do so subconsciously? To find out, the researchers asked the participants to sort the backward statements they heard into one of 5 categories: nursery rhymes, Christian, satanic, pornographic, or advertising. They reasoned that if some sort of meaning could be subconsciously understood, the participants might sort the statements non-randomly. Yet participants did no better at this task than random chance would predict. Perhaps backward messages might influence people's behavior even if the messages were not perceived consciously. Some people. To check on this possibility, Vokey and Reed conducted another study. This time, they presented a backward version of a message whose sentences contain homophones, words that sound alike but have 2 spellings and 2 different meanings, such as feet and feet, F-E-A-T and F-E-E-T. When heard in the normal forward direction, such messages affect people's spelling of ambiguous words that are read aloud to them at a later time. For example, they tend to spell out F-E-A-T rather than F-E-E-T. If they had previously heard the sentence, it was a great feat of strength. This example of primary occurs when if people do not recall having heard the message. After hearing a backward version of the message, however, the participants in the study did not produce the expected spelling bias. What does the results mean? It wasn't possible for the participants to understand meaning in the backward messages at a subconscious level. It seems that the backward messages are not consciously or unconsciously understood, nor do they influence behavior. What do we need to know? Why does the incorrect idea persist that backward messages can influence behavior? Beliefs and suspicions do not simply appear in the face of contrary scientific evidence. Perhaps such evidence needs to be publicized more widely in order to lay the misconceptions to rest. Perhaps, though, some people so deeply want to believe in the existence and power of backward messages in popular music that such beliefs will forever remain folk myths in Western culture. Altered states of consciousness. Altered states and cultural values. Cultures differing their definitions of which altered states of consciousness are approved and which are inappropriate. Here we see members of a Brazilian spirit possession cult in various stages of trance, and in Peru, a man receives a cup of ayahuasca, a traditional Amazonian plant medicine, which is induced hallucinogenic visions and altered states of consciousness. and to facilitate healing. Mm, okay. When changes in mental processes are great enough for you or others to notice significant differences in how you function, you are said to have entered an altered state of consciousness. In an altered state, mental processing shows distinct changes that are unique to that state. Cognitive processes or perceptions of yourself or the world may change. The normal inhibitions or self-control may weaken. Sorry. The phrase altered states of consciousness recognizes waking consciousness as the most common state, a baseline against which altered states are compared. However, this is not to say that waking consciousness is universally considered more normal, proper, or valued than other states. In fact, judgments about the status, and meaning of certain states of consciousness vary considerably across cultures. Consider, for instance, hallucinations, such which are perceptual experiences such as hearing voices that occur without sensory stimulation from the outside world. In many cultures, including the United States, experiencing hallucinations is closely associated with the stigma of mental illness. So even the hallucinations are caused by nothing more than an eye disorder. People may be ashamed to seek medical help. Mental patients, too, may avoid reporting their hallucinations is closely associated with the stigma of mental illness. So even if the hallucinations are caused by nothing more than an eye disorder, people may be ashamed to seek medical help. Mental patients too may avoid reporting their hallucinations because those who do report them tend to be considered more disturbed and may receive more drastic treatments than patients who keep their hallucinations to themselves. Among the Moche of Peru, however, hallucinations have been culturally approved place. When someone experiences illnesses of misfortune or healer conducts an elaborate ritual to find causes and treatments. During the ceremony, the healer takes mescaline, 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 a drug that causes hallucinations. These hallucinations are thought to give the healer spiritual insight into the patient's problem. In many other tribal cultures, too, purposeful hallucinations are respected, not stigmatized. In other words, states of consciousness differ not only in their person, alert person, or irregular, small, and closely spaced. That is high frequency and low amplitude. A relaxed person with closed eyes shows more rhythmic brain waves occurring at slower speeds, with 8 to 12 cycles per second. During a normal night's sleep, your brain waves show distinctive and systematic changes in amplitude and frequency as you pass through various stages of sleep. Non-REM sleep. Imagine that you are participating in a sleep study. You are hooked up to an EEG and various monitors, and a video camera watches as you sleep through the night. If you were to view the results, here's what you see. At first, you are relaxed with your eyes closed, but you are still awake. At this point, your muscle tone and eye movements are normal, and your EEG shows the slow brain waves associated with relaxation. Then, as you drift into sleep, your breathing deepens, your heartbeat slows, um, and your blood pressure falls. Over the next half hour, you descend through three stages of sleep: N1, N2, and N3, that are characterized by even slower brain waves with even higher amplitude. Together, these three stages are called NREM and non-REM sleep because they do not include the rapid eye movements, REM, described in the next section. The deepest of the NREM stages, N3, is also known as slow wave sleep. When you reach stage 3, it's quite difficult to wake up. If you were roused from this stage of deep sleep, you'd be groggy and slow to answer questions. Wow, that's what you do. Wow. Mm. REM sleep. After 30 to 40 minutes in stage 3, you quickly return to stage 2 and then enter a unique stage in which your eyes more rapidly under your closed lids. This is called REM, rapid eye movement sleep. It is also called paradoxical sleep because its characteristics contain a paradox or contradiction. In REM sleep, your EEG looks like an awake, alert person, and aspects of your physiological arousal, which such as heart rate, breathing, and blood pressure, also resemble those when you are awake. However, most of your muscles are nearly paralyzed. Thus, REM sleep and NREM sleep are quite different. A night's sleep. Most people pass through the cycle of sleep stages 4 to 6 times each night. Each cycle lasts about 90 minutes, but the pattern and length of the stages change somewhat. Early in the night, most time is spent in NREM with only a few minutes. Wow. EEG during sleep. EEG recordings of range wave activity show three relative distinct stages of sleep. Notice the regular patterns of the brain waves that occur just before a person goes to sleep, followed by the even slower waves as sleep becomes deeper in non-REM stages. N1 through N3 in REM, rapid eye movement. Sleep, the frequency of brain waves increases dramatically. In some ways, the brain waves of REM sleep resemble patterns seen in people who are awake. REM, rapid eye movement, non-rapid eye movement. Sleep stages N1, N2, and N3, they are accompanied by gradually slower and deeper breathing, a calm, regular heartbeat, reduced blood pressure, and slow brain waves. The stage of sleep during which muscle tone decreases dramatically, but the EEG resembles that of someone who is awake. In the REM, as sleep continues, though it is dominated by stage N2 and REM sleep, from which sleepers finally awaken. Sleep patterns also change with age. A newborn sleeps about 16 hours a day, but time spent sleeping decreases during childhood and averages 7 to 8 hours a day by adulthood. Not only do we sleep less as we age, the agriculture or composition of sleep also changes. REM accounts for half of the newborn sleep, but less than 25% in young adults, and even less in the elderly. Elderly people spend more time in N1 and N2, the lighter stages of sleep. These, through the National Sleep Foundation, recommends that most adults should sleep 7 or 9 hours each night. Individual needs vary widely. Some people feel rested after 5 hours of sleep, while others of similar age need 9 hours or more. Sleep disorders. Most people have sleep related problems at one time or another. These can range from grogginess after a late night out to occasional nights of tossing and turning to more serious and long term sleep disorders that affect 70 million people in the United States alone. The most common sleep disorder is insomnia, in which people feel fatigued during waking hours because they did not go enough sleep to feel rested. If for a month or more you have difficulties getting to sleep or staying asleep, you may be suffering from insomnia. Besides being tiring, insomnia may cause mental distress, health problems, impaired everyday functioning, and even fatal accidents. Fatigue related workplace accidents and errors are estimated to cost US economy 31.1 billion annually. And a study in Norway found that people who have insomnia were nearly 5 times more likely than others to develop a permanent work disability. Overall, people with insomnia are 3 times more likely to show a mental disorder than those who no sleep complaints. Insomnia is especially associated with depression and anxiety disorders. It is not clear from such correlations, however, whether insomnia causes mental disorders. Men- what the freak is going on? Oh, it was moving fast. It is not clear from such correlations, however, whether insomnia causes mental disorders. Mental disorders cause insomnia or some other factor causes both. Some medications may relieve insomnia temporarily, but they may have unwanted side effects. Reduce REM sleep and unlimiting lead to dependency and increased sleeplessness. A better long-term approach may come from leaning-based treatments, including the cognitive behavior therapy methods described in the chapter on treatment of psychological disorders, and the progressive relaxation training techniques mentioned in the chapter on health, stress, and coping. This approach promotes better sleep by reducing anxiety, tension, and other stress reactions that interfere with sleep. Short daytime naps and moderate evening exercise also help some people fall asleep more easily and sleep better, with better mood and performance the next day. Neuro- narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is a disturbing daytime sleep disorder that is typically first seen in people between 10 and 20 years old. People with narcolepsy suddenly enter REM sleep directly from a waking state, often while laughing or experiencing some other emotional state. Because of the loss of muscle tone in REM, these people may display cataplexy, meaning that they collapse and remain briefly immobile even after waking. The neurological source of this attack appears to be in the brain's lateral hypothalamus. The exact cause of narcolepsy is unknown in some cases, but in many others, it appears to involve the loss of cells in the hypothalamus that release the neurotransmitter orexin, also called hypocretin. Because medicines that block orexin can help people with insomnia fall asleep, it is hoped that new medicines that mimic orexin will make people with narcolepsy feel more alert. Stimulant medications taken in the morning may also help reduce daytime fatigue. You need to turn the air off because you're getting out of the shower. What is it on? At the no, right. That's Jay. You're gonna get sick coming to that like that. Oh, you turned it off? Okay. People who suffer from sleep apnea briefly stop breathing hundreds of times each night, waking each time long enough to resume breathing. In the morning, they don't recall the wakings, but they feel tired and tend to have headaches, learning disabilities, and trouble paying attention. The daytime fatigue and inattention caused by sleep apnea also increase the risk of accidents. In one tragic case, a New Jersey Transit train engineer who was unaware of having sleep apnea fell asleep as his train came into a station, resulting in an accident that killed one person and injured 100 others. Sleep apnea is also associated with an increased risk of high blood pressure and stroke. Apnea has many causes, including genetic predisposition, obesity, problems with brain mechanisms that control breathing and compression of the windpipe. Effective treatments include weight loss and the use of sleep masks like CPAP, continuous passive airway pressure, to help keep breathing passages open. In some cases, surgery can be needed to widen the air passageway in the upper throat. In cases of sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, sleeping infants stop breathing and die. SIDS is the most common cause of unexpected infant death between the ages of 1 month and 1 year. In the United States, it strikes about 6 of every 10,000 infants, especially very low birth weight babies, usually when they are 2 or 4 months old. SIDS cases are associated with exposure to cigarette smoke, problems with brain systems that regulate breathing, and genetic factors. By far, however, the most important causes stem from how and when infants sleep. In many countries, infants and parents typically sleep in the same bed. Does this increase the risk of SIDS? It does in some countries, including the United States, but not in others. The differing risks may have to do with the kind of bedding used or sleeping position. Correlational evidence suggests that about half of parent SIDS cases might actually be accidental suffocations and offer occur when the infant sleep face down on a soft surface. In the United States, for example, SIDS is particularly common when caregivers place babies in the face down position. The danger of the face down position is especially great for babies who don't usually sleep in the position, who are not breastfed, or who don't sleep with a pacifier in their mouths. Since 1992, when a public health campaign called Back to Sleep urged parents to put their babies in a face up sleeping position, the number of infants dying from SIDS in the United States has dropped by 71%. Sleepwalking, which occurs in NREM sleep, affects about 5% of children and 1 to 2% of adults. By morning, most sleepwalkers have forgotten their travels and their sometimes bizarre activities. One sleepwalking man had no recollection of tying his 4-month-old daughter to a clothesline in his attic. Mm-mm. Sleepwalking has been associated with several possible causes, including genetic predisposition, sleep deprivation, and some side effects of some drug. While walking while asleep can lead to injury, so affected individuals are advised to remove fall risks in their bedrooms. Most children simply outgrow the problem. There are no consistently effective medical treatments for adult sleepwalking. But some sleepwalkers have found relief supply by adopting more regular sleep habits, reducing alcohol use, seeking treatment of sleep apnea if they have it, and eliminating light, noise, and anything else that might disrupt sleep. One sleepwalker was cured when his wife blew a whistle whenever he began to night stroll. Despite myths to the contrary, waking a sleepwalker is too harmful. Hmm. Mm. I have 3 more pages in this, so I'm gonna continue. Nightmares are frightening REM dreams that occur in 4 to 8% of the general population. Adult women report more nightmares than men, and they are especially common in people who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder following military combat, torture, sexual assault, or other horrific events. Some medicines can help reduce the frequency of nightmares, as can imaginary therapy. Uh, in which people repeatedly imagine new and less frightening outcomes to their nightmares. Sleep terror disorder involves frightful dreams, amazed, uh, Excuse me. Mm, I don't even know where I left off at. Uh, Sleep terror disorder involves frightful dream images during stage three in three sleep. Sleepers often awaken from a night terror with a bloody curdling scream and remain intensely afraid for up to 30 minutes, yet they may not recall the episode in their brain. Sleep terror disorders, especially common in children, but adults can suffer mild versions, and it appears to be partially inherited. The condition is sometimes treatable with medication and psychotherapy. The REM behavior disorder sleepers enter REM sleep without the near paralysis that normally accompanies it. As a result, they can act out their dreams. If the dreams are violent, the disorder can be dangerous to the dreamer or those nearby. One 9-year-old boy in New York City was seriously injured when he jumped from a third floor window while dreaming that his parents were being murdered. In another case, a man shot his wife to death while dreaming that burglars were invading their home. Although he was acquitted of murder charges, most defendants who offer a REM behavior disorder or sleepwalking defense are convicted. REM behavior disorder, which sometimes occurs along with daytime narcolepsy, can occur as a side effect of medication. In a rare cases, stem huh, rare cases from brain tumors or diseases that cause swelling in the brain. Though prescription drugs are usually effective in treating REM behavior disorder, this condition may actually be an early sign of something more serious. As many as 90% of people with REM behavior disorder go to develop Parkinson's disease or other similar neurological disorders. Why do people sleep? People need a certain amount of uninterrupted sleep to function normally. In fact, most living creatures sleep. In trying to understand why people sleep, psychological scientists have studied what sleep does for us and how the brain shapes the characteristics of sleep. Sleep as a circadian rhythm. Humans and most all animals display cycles of behavior and physiologically they repeat every 24 hours. Circadian rhythms are linked to signals such as light of day and the dark of night. However, most of these rhythms continue even when no time signals are available. People living for months without internal cues to light and dark still remain daily rhythms in sleeping and waking, eating, urination, hormone release, and other physiological functions. Under such conditions, these cycles repeat about every 24 hours. Trying to change our sleep wake cycle can create problems. A common example is seen when air travel across several time zones causes jet lag, a pattern of fatigue, irritability, inattention, and sleeping problems that can last for several days. The traveler's bodies feel ready to sleep at the wrong time for the new location. It tends to be easier to stay awake longer than usual than to go to sleep earlier than usual. That explains why jet lag symptoms are usually more intense after a long eastward trip when time is lost than after a long westward journey when time is gained. Symptoms similar to those of jet lag also occur when workers repeatedly change between day and night shifts, or when people try to go to sleep early on a Sunday night after a weekend of later than usual bedtimes. For these people, Monday morning blues may actually be symptoms of a disrupted sleep wake cycle. The timing of circadian sleep rhythms varies from person to person. Most people fall into one of two patterns. Some have a natural tendency to stay up later at night, while others normally tend to wake up earlier in the morning. These different chronotypes may occur because of clock genes that lead to dawn cells that are especially responsive at sunrise and the dusk cells that respond best at sunset. The coordination operation of these different kinds of cells may help to determine the daily peaks and valleys in a person's sleepiness and wakefulness, hormone levels, and body temperature. The functioning of these symptoms appears to be impaired by brain disorders such as Alzheimer's disease, which may explain the sleep disruptions often seen in people with these disorders. Because their sleep wake rhythms stay about the same even without external cues about light and dark, we must have an internal biological clock that keeps track of time. As shown in the figure 4.2, this clock is in the supra supragamastic nuclei SCN of the hypothalamus. The SCN receives light information from a special set of photoreceptors in the eyes and then sends signals to the hindbrain areas that initiate sleep or wakefulness. When animals with SCN damage receive transplanted SCN cells, their circadian rhythms become like those of the donor animal. SCN neurons appear to regulate the release of the hormone melatonin. Melatonin rises during periods of darkness and appears to be important in maintaining circadian rhythms. Many symptoms associated with jet lag and other disruptions in sleep-wake cycles can be prevented or treated by taking melatonin. It may also be possible to reduce jet lag through diet, exercise, and exposure to natural lighting conditions upon daytime arrival or dim light upon nighttime arrival. The value of sleep. One way to explore what sleep does for us is to study what happens when we are prevented from sleep. After being deprived of sleep, people don't need to make up every hour of lost sleep. Instead, they sleep about 50% more than usual, then awake up feeling rested. But their recovery night includes an unusual high percentage of REM sleep. And if people are deprived only from REM sleep, they compensate even more specifically. In one study, research participants were awakened whenever their EEGs showed REM. When allowed to sleep normally the next night, they rebounded, nearly double the percentage of time resting REM. Such research suggests that we have a specific need for REM sleep, perhaps because it has its own special functions. What might these functions be? There are several interesting possibilities. One idea is the REM improves the functioning of neurons that use norepinephrine, a neurotransmitter released by cells in the locus coeruleus. During waking hours, the locus coeruleus affects alerts and mood, but neurons respond less to norepinephrine. If it is released continuously for too long, REM sleep deprivation causes unusually high norepinephrine levels and decreased daytime alertness. Researchers suggest that because the locus coeruleus is almost completely inactive during REM sleep, REM helps restore sensitivity to norepinephrine and thus is ability to keep us alert. REM sleep may also help your brain consolidate some of what you learn during the day by improving the connections that form between nerve cells in the brain. This function might explain why infants and young children whose brains are still developing spend so much time in REM sleep, and why preschoolers appear to learn better if they take afternoon naps. Evidence for such a mechanism includes animal research showing that REM sleep increases neural connections after new learning experiences. Also, memory for a learned task is improved when odors or other sensory cues present during the task are present again during REM sleep, suggesting that REM helped make memory stronger. Other studies have found that information, including emotional information or certain aspects of language, is remembered better and longer when followed immediately by sleep, especially REM sleep. Every 60 or 90-minute naps in which REM sleep occurs can be enough to solidify the learning of visual information. Findings like these support the general idea. Further support comes from evidence that being deprived of REM sleep shows the creation of nerve cell connections formed during learning. When people are deprived of REM sleep, their performance at a skill they had learned the day before suffers when compared with people who either were deprived of NREM sleep or had slept normally. However, if people were given medication that increases the activity of acetylcholine in the brain, REM sleep deprivation does not have the same disruptive effect on learning. This suggests that the learning impairment seen after REM sleep deprivation may be caused by its effects on brain circuits that use acetylcholine. If REM sleep deprivation can interfere with learning, could it be used to help people forget trauma events? Some researchers have suggested that sleep deprivation immediately after a trauma might reduce the risk of post traumatic disorder, but others disagree. Further research will be needed to elevate this hypothesis. What are the effects of total sleep deprivation? People who go without sleep for as long as a week usually don't suffer serious long term effects. However, extended sleeplessness does lead to fatigue, irritability, memory problems, and inattention. Even short term sleep deprivation can take its toll on mental and physical functioning. For example, physicians who work all night without sleep show erratic heart rhythm and blood pressure, as well as impairments in their immune system. Sleep deprivation may lead suspects being interrogated by the police to confess a crime they did not commit. And it appears that sleep deprived judges impose harsher penalties in those who are well rested. By estimate, by one estimate, 23.7% of all workplace accidents in the United States are related to sleep deprivation. In a 2014 case similar to the sleep apnea tragedy described earlier, 33 passengers were injured when a sleep deprived Chicago Transit Authority train operator fell asleep and her train slammed into a station at the end of the line. Most fatal car crashes in the United States occur during the fatigue hazard, hours of midnight to 6 a.m., and sleepiness resulting from long work shifts, or other causes a major factor up to 25% of all auto accidents. Sleep related fatigue has also been identified as a major cause of traffic accidents in Asia, South America, and Europe. Drivers in the 16 Drivers in the 17 to 24 age range, who generally tend to get too little sleep, are more likely than other groups to have car accidents, especially on weekends. The fact that sleepy driving can be as dangerous as a drunk driving led the states of Arkansas and New Jersey to expand the definition of reckless or negligent driving to include driving while fatigued, having had no sleep in the previous 24 hours. Fatigue even plays a role in many injuries suffered by sleepy young children at play or in daycare. Finally, even though certain parts of the cerebral cortex increase their activity when a sleep deprived person faces a learning task, performance to such tasks and an IQ test is still impaired after sleep deprivation. Scientists are looking for drugs that can combat the effects of sleep deprivation, but there seems to be no substitute for sleep itself. It appears to help restore the body and the brain future activity. The restorative function is especially associated with NREM sleep, which would help explain why most people get their NREM sleep in the first part of the night. Fortunately, if you know you are going to face a period of sleep deprivation, you can reduce its effects to some extent by sleeping more than usual for, say, a week beforehand. Sleep and sleep disorders. Wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Ooh, okay. Yeah.